This is a weekend trade blast reviewing the trading of Tesla stock for the week and kind of what we can expect going into next week. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. I wanted to also share that we actually do everyday trade blasts for our Patreon subscribers at the high end. And then we usually have at least one, if not three extra shows for our Patreon subscribers each week. So if you enjoy this show, please take time out to subscribe on Patreon and look at the different tiers to see which of them you'd like to consider. I wanted to also note that I do have some things to cover, but it wasn't a huge agenda. The goal was really to sort of review some trading that happened this week and actually sort of draw some analysis from it that we can work with. Also wanted to note we have our SpaceX trip coming up at the beginning of April. It's looking good. We're solidifying the number of presenters as well as some awesome information about what's going on with SpaceX, previous, current, and future. And if you'd like to join us on that trip, please drop a note to admin@Teslafaninsight, and we can get you some information about that. So I wanted to come on today. We haven't been doing sort of trade blasts at the end of the week, and wanted to come on today and sort of do, in this case, a live show regarding what's been happening in trading, because I saw something happen yesterday that was pretty mind-blowing. The top tier of subscribers for our trade blasts on Patreon, it's at the $125 level. And one of our viewers, from what I can tell, he did between $1 and $2 million yesterday off of Tesla's stock price based on some of the discussions we've been having on the show. And my thought process was, wow, if somebody's making $1 million in one day off of sort of advice we're providing, it might not be a bad idea for me to share more broadly with what happened, why, what's going on, et cetera, because even if you don't make $1 million, perhaps at the end of the week, because of some issues that happen, you might be able to make a few $100,000 or a few $1,000s would be great. So therefore, our show today and why I've decided probably to start doing a what happened this week trade blast situation. So in general, what I typically say about what's happening in trading for Tesla for the week is kind of the front end of the week. The stock tends to be up for a number of reasons. And then as we close out the week, we get into what's called the pin zone. And so how did I figure out I've been thinking about writing a book on trading for the last couple of years. And one of the things about trading I think is amazing is to watch how you develop certain disciplines of what you do, and then the market figures out what they are. And all of a sudden, all these disciplines that you're wanting to share with everyone to show that you're really bright totally get destroyed because the marketplace will adjust to whatever it is that you've presented as a process. And so literally people will blow up the trade by trading the other side of it. So the trade in particular that I've been sort of fascinated by and studying it casually for the last 20 years is what I call sort of the pin process that's associated with the end of the week trading. So I can discuss it now with you. You'll know what it is because you'll want to ask me, well, what do you think is going to happen this week? Don't ask. What I think is going to happen is through Wednesday, the stock will float around, most likely be up, possibly down because of coronavirus. But as we get to the end of the week, a really interesting process happens, and I'll explain to you how I figured it out. So there are instruments called puts and calls. And by the way, as I go into this, we do have our 1 hour one-on-one lecture to explain to you basic options process, and we have some advanced stuff if you want to get into it deep. And the reason you might want to get into deep is 10x your money in 24 hours is kind of one of the reasons why people learn how to trade and how to deal with options. So what happened is that I kept having a problem in my trading, which is if it's a Thursday and all the options expire on Friday, what would happen is that most people, including myself, have a positive bias on a stock. So what kept happening to me, and this must have happened maybe 50 times until I finally embraced it. Um, uh, uh, and so what ended up happening, by the way, if you guys want to do collaborations and stuff, I just saw a note about this, please send me the email. Don't put it on the screen here. It's admin@Teslafaninsight, and I can have conversations with you there, because there are some people with stochastics and other things that I don't use. I'd like to learn them, and I think other people would like to learn as well. So the thing that happened is that I kept losing money on these trades until I finally decided to embrace. So one of the nightmares of trading is that you think you're smart. You think you're going to make money. You've got all the processes in the world down and you're ready to go. Then you go in there, you buy a call or a put, in particular a call as we're getting towards a pin, and you get killed on the trade. So what I mean by this, yesterday Tesla stock price finished at 703, but based on how the pin process works, all the double zeros or 50s are big. So for example, 750 is an important number in terms of a round number. Another important number is 700s. Another important number is 650. Another important number is 600. On the flip side of that, important numbers in the options world is 800, 900, all those zeros. So one of the things that's really fascinating is if you go through and look at the open interests, what you'll notice is there tends to be a positive bias, meaning that if you look at the number of puts and calls at a certain strike price, you'll kind of notice without any brilliance, nothing, doesn't have to be smart, just notice the fact that there tend to be at least 30 to 50% more calls at that strike price than there are puts that are open interests. What are open interests? It means that if you want to buy a call, there's an institution that will create it. If you want to buy a put, an institution will create that. So more people own calls than puts, and you can actually just look. If you go to Yahoo Finance, type in Tesla or TSLA as a stock you want to look at, and then look at the far right of the page, and you'll see something that says options. Hit on that, and then what it'll bring up is a list of all these options. So all you have to do is the first option that comes up, look at the number of calls and look at the number of puts. You'll notice there are more calls, and keep following the string down to look at all these strike prices, and you'll notice just one of the weird things is there's more people with kind of a positive bias on most stocks. So one of the other phenomenons I noticed was that one of the ways to anticipate what was going to happen at strike price expiration dates, like yesterday on a Friday, was that I could predict how the stock was going to go by the percentage of puts or calls that were there. So if there's a huge number of calls and a small number of puts, the market makers have it in their best interest to lower the stock price below 700, making sure that all of these people who have call options expire worthless on Friday. And so this concept is what I call a pin. They pin the price of the stock just below the number so that all those people above the number lose their shirts. Now, you could argue against what I just said, because all you have to do is look yesterday and say, oh, Greg, stock closed at 703. You're wrong. And you're absolutely right about that comment. However, think about how the stock opened. Stock closed on Thursday at 721, opened up at 686. So for someone who's playing this pin game, in theory, the way you get 10 times your money overnight is there are these, I'm not going to say crazy, I'm saying aggressive folks that are among our viewers that are out there trading that were like, oh, we're expecting a pin to happen on Friday. So what we're going to do is open up a position with a large number of puts. In this case, he did 160 puts at 700. And overnight, Okay, I'm trying to address sound quality here with a comment that was made. So what I'm getting at in this situation is that basically this person put up, from what I can tell, about $160,000 and waited basically 12 hours until the open, sold out, and picked up $1.6 million. Now, there have been comments made already saying this is risky, this is bad. I totally agree. I didn't do the trade. I wasn't going to do trade with my own money. However, it's good to understand what's happening, because if you decide to put your cash out there, you get to make some nice cash, or you could lose it. So, and by the way, I want to thank all of you for sending. I have some of my friends from Patreon or not that are sending notes and saying, I have a list of, this is a trade that I want to do. And what do you think of the trade? Well, in general, I'll share comments on something that I've seen that I think is an interesting trade. But my strategy basically is to not get into that, because there's like 50 variables that go into a trade. How old are you? How much money you have? How much money you have to lose? There's all this list that it takes to understand. And that's why I end up charging for the time it takes to do it, because a good trade involves more than simply the instrument that's there. There's a whole structure that might go on to make sure the trade is well executed and done. So no, I don't do the quickie, I just did this, what do you think? No, I'm not going to do that. Plus, there are SEC rules about that as well. So one has to tread lightly on that stuff. So, but what I'm really trying to get to is that there's a book called The Black Swan, which I've recommended to everyone. And in essence, there's this thing called the Black Swan trading strategy. And what it is people that do the Black Swan simply go in, take a few $1,000s every Thursday or Friday morning, and they put it down on one side, either puts or calls, for whatever reason they're doing in their strategy. And they wait until the end of the day, and they've either made money or lost money. But that's the Black Swan trading process. You're sort of riding with your best, and you're only taking a small portion of the portfolio, and you can either get crushed or make a killing from that occurring. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this show today, and I know this is way beyond what's happening with Tesla, because we're very focused on just trading on our trade blast, which this is today, is that obviously Tesla is one of the most heavily traded stocks out there. And so while you're learning about good investing in Tesla, understanding trading and what's going on can be an enhancement to what you're doing, because there are a lot of changes that are impacted by it. So, so one of the things that happened on Thursday, as I did my Trade Blast show with, I was thinking to myself, okay, number one, we know what the pattern is. We know what the pattern is in terms of how the weekly trading week tends to go for Tesla. I wanted to note that what happened to me was, I was thinking on Thursday, I was like, okay, I told everybody, look, I'm going to stick with what I usually stick with, which is I think a pin is going to happen on Friday. And then after I said it and the show ended, I was thinking to myself, okay, we've been watching Tesla stock all week. Every time it's gotten sort of sub 720, it started moving back up towards 750, 730s, 740s. And I was thinking to myself, wow, a pin is supposed to happen on Friday when I said it on Thursday. But I kept thinking to myself, there's no way in the world that this pin will occur. And the reason is that with the stock market down 1,000 points, and Tesla stock rising into that downward trend, how are they going to get the stock below 700 when you have the entire market, that Tesla's been able to storm in the opposite direction on? And so therefore, I sort of finished up on Thursday thinking, saying this pin should occur on Friday. But my real thinking was that there's no way they can pull this off. And guess what? I was completely wrong. And so this is one of the reasons why my trade book isn't out yet, because part of good trading may involve doing very structured things that are completely insane relative to everything else you see going on, but have a very, very sound theoretical basis in terms of how and why you're doing it. So I just have to give kudos to all the folks that are in the trading world on the Goldman Sachs and all the former Wall Streeters who are now trading on their own, because it took a lot of guts to go ahead and buy puts at the 700 strike price on Tesla when the stock is in the 720s or 730s, and it's in general been over the week have a positive bias. And so basically those folks made a killing because the stock fell, I believe it was 38 points on the overnight as they opened on Friday morning. And all you had to do is sell out at that point and collect your cash and be happy. So one of my Patreon viewers was a very, very happy person. And I think I may try to interview him, even if it's by email, to find out what his logic was, because he absolutely made a killing. 168 units. Oh my gosh. I mean, he had a lot of money at risk, but he made an absolute killing. So I want to say congratulations. So I know the next question is, what is this week going to look like? And guess what the answer I'm going to give you is, I expect the stock to be up moderately so for the first part of the week. And then when we get to Wednesday afternoon or Thursday afternoon, heading into Friday morning, I expect a pin to occur. And I'm telling you, before I even see anything happening here, it seems like the pin zone right now is going to be about 700. But I just wanted to note, don't ask what I'm thinking, because I'm telling you ahead of time about this right now. Any rate, I have to admit that there's a lot of Tesla subjects to cover, and this is really a trade blast. So I'm going to read through the comments that were made and answer them, on the next show, which is, we have another show coming up tomorrow that's a legitimate Tesla show, but this is kind of an illegitimate Tesla show because we're doing a trade blast and may not cover things. So another thing that's coming up from a trading standpoint is there's an instrument called USO. If you type it into your computer, what it'll bring up is options you can do on oil. So there's something interesting happening. So for those of you who like to trade, understand it a bit, there's certain instruments I've traded over time that I thought were interesting. Tesla's very risky because its options are so expensive. You can lose so much quickly. And so there are these other trades that are sitting out there waiting right now. And so one of my viewers, his name is Leslie, lives in Canada. He pointed out that, oil got down to about 45 this week from 52 before the coronavirus stuff really hit. So what he was saying is that he thinks oil is going to $30 a barrel. And I think it'll get below 40 easily in the next week or two, particularly as shutdowns occur. But in terms of no-brainer trades I see coming across, this really looks like one to me. And here's why. What you'll notice is starting to happen is I think it's United Airlines has mothballed 25% of their fleet. There are a number of airlines that are now flying sort of empty planes just to maintain their landing slots and losing money just so they can have the slots once things recover. I don't know if you've been watching the coronavirus thing with this cruise ship, but there's a wild question that I'm asking. There's another blogger. She has a show called the Fun and Budget Act, and she does a great job. She's been helpful to my show and putting me on hers. I want to give her a little blast because she is really cool and smart. She's going on a cruise yesterday, and she was explaining how she would not be deterred by the fear that everyone had, and her cruise was going to the Caribbean rather than being a sort of San Francisco to Hawaii trip like the one that's stranded. So what keeps blazing in my mind is, why would anybody in their right mind get on a cruise ship right now? Because all you need is for one person on that ship to have the virus. And now they're going to quarantine the whole ship with the potential of a whole bunch more people getting sick on that cruise ship. So I like cruises, but if you're a friend of mine and I'm considering you're a friend of mine, I want to highly recommend you not do a cruise for the next 6 months, a year until they figure this out. Because what a colossal nightmare to be on a ship where it's sitting in the water floating, waiting for you to catch the virus. Flying is not a big deal. Sam just made the comment, I'm flying the Bahamas tomorrow. Bahamas is great. A flight is great, limited number of people, limited amount of time for you to catch anything. Sitting on a cruise ship for a week where you have a couple of sick people who are passing along that virus and potentially has the whole ship quarantined, sitting offshore for multiple days. Good luck on that. So I bring up that issue because they use a lot of fuel on those cruise ships. Guess what? I think there are a lot of people that are going to cancel cruises. So what we're seeing is a number of different ways where fuel consumption is being reduced. And as it's reduced, you have oil prices falling because demand is falling. So OPEC is trying to figure right now how to reduce price or reduce inventory of oil so they can prop up prices. But Russia has not been going for it. So what I'm thinking is, if you want to do some trading and you don't want the nosebleed potential of what's going on with Tesla, check out USO, because I just think that oil consumption is declining. If you were really smart, you could actually figure out both the consumption in oil and the price of oil and infer what the global economy is going to do based on those numbers. Another data point that was shared by Leslie, our show friend in Canada, was he pointed out, look, so in Canada, there's something called the oil sands. And I think they've lowered the number, but as of 2 years ago, the break-even point for making money from getting oil from the oil sands was somewhere around $50 a barrel. Maybe it was 45. Maybe that number has been lowered a little bit. What he pointed out, though, was that if oil drops to $30 a barrel, there's a whole bunch of people who now have jobs in Alberta, Canada, who will be unemployed because they're losing money on any oil that they produce based on this process. So there are, sort of interesting implications on things going on out there. And, there's sort of the opposite side of what you may be seeing directly in front of you that you could learn how to trade profitably. And I really, really think that oil is very easy to trade, and you can simply sort of sit there and collect nice returns without the headache of the volatility of Tesla, because oil is a global commodity and it does move, but it doesn't move like Tesla does in one day massively. So as we began with, I really wanted to highlight that, if you're an investor in Tesla, you're doing well with it. Congratulations. I have to admit the trade that this gentleman did was excellent. It was very profitable. It was extremely risky, but it made sense based on the logic of how things have been going. So I wanted to say that one of the hardest parts of trading, and now I really see why there's a whole bunch of people who end up using bots for trading, because once you set the bot for trading, you don't have to worry about how do you feel about the market. I've actually gotten, so basically the biggest things I've seen the bots do that I think were smart was the ability to sort of exit right away, take the loss that you take there, because you can come back and buy back into the market if things are okay. But if not, and they continue to drop south, it makes it hard for you to find an exit point for your trades. So when we say bot trading, we're really talking about what does your computer say based on all the signals that are coming up. And in theory, you could be a bot trader as well, instead of just saying, okay, I see the situation, I'm going to go over and do the trade, because it reduces the chance that you might hesitate on that trade and lose a lot of money in the process. So, sort of this is it. So I just wanted to review, we do have our daily trade blasts for our top of the line Patreon folks. If you're serious about trading and making money, I think it's worth your time. Also wanted to note to you that we're obviously in a very dicey circumstance in terms of movements driven by the economy slowing down, driven by the virus and how it's hitting in different places. I think the bias of the whole market, including Tesla, should be negative going forward for the next at least month or two, unless we have things like Tesla earnings that are good to prop things up a bit in the short term. But it just feels to me like with viruses, something like 6 months to a year, vaccines between 6 months and a year away, I just think there's a high likelihood that we end up with a very ugly situation where the global economy gets jammed. But what's nice is if you're trading puts on the opposite side of things, I think you could make a great deal of money. And I think, USO is a great way to go to think about that. That's not as risky, volatile as Tesla. So, at any rate, I want to remind you to hit the like button as well as subscribe. We also wanted to note we could use some support on Patreon if you would. Constructive suggestions are appreciated on our show. We've been doing less of the live shows because we've started getting trolls who are making comments online that potentially get us tossed off YouTube. Has nothing to do with us, but it just looks like there are some different methods that people are using to sort of mess up different people's shows. But we're working on improving our editing, improving every aspect of our show, and therefore both appreciate and respect input made by all of you. I noticed Jerry had a number of posts there. I want to thank you for your comments. Try to respond to items that people have put up, but I will likely just copy your comments and put them underneath the show, and then myself and other people can comment on them from there. I wanted to let you guys know that I actually went to a restaurant yesterday. It's called Croaker Spot, and it happened to be, I had a meeting that I had to do, and I ran down to the Richmond, Virginia area, and they had 3 restaurants. And I made a mistake from a cybersecurity standpoint, and that is that it's a Black-owned restaurant. Food was excellent, but very disorganized in many ways, one of which was I used my credit card to pay, and there was all kinds of drama with their system running properly. I had to call my bank to make sure the charge went through. It was very crazy. One of the rules of thumb when you're dealing with cybersecurity is the smaller the company is, the worse their cybersecurity is. So if you're going to use a credit card or your debit card, use it at larger organizations that can afford an IT and cybersecurity team. Do not use credit cards, et cetera, at small organizations that can't afford to provide good security for the data that they're exchanging across things like the credit cards. So, and by the way, we've obviously seen Target and others get hit. So even the big guys can get hit, but there's a lower chance because they actually have the manpower and equipment power to manage that stuff. Plus they'll pay you back readily if they screw up, whereas the smaller organizations don't. So your health tip for cybersecurity today is small organizations that don't have the resources for good cybersecurity. Don't use your credit card, debit card there. It just introduces potential for nightmares you do not want to deal with. Any rate, also wanted to remind you of our health tips. Don't forget at least 25 leg lifts a day on each leg with a 5-pound weight on as a way to reduce the chance of knee issues. We also wanted to encourage you to think about the 5-2 or another one of those diets. Do not go to bed within 2 hours of eating, preferably 4 hours, so the food can digest and you don't get acid indigestion or reflux issues related. And that obviously can lead to cancer. Wanted to also encourage you 30 SPF or better if you're going to be out in the sun to reduce the chance of issues there. And we also want to add in there that try the 2 weeks of going to bed and waking up at the same time all the time, because it puts your body in a predictable circadian rhythm that'll help you be your best all the time rather than tired, etc. INO drug flu play is one of the things Mr. Chu just talked about. I'm hoping that all these virus protection entities work, but those stocks have been going bananas, and I'm kind of like, wow. I mean, Gilead was one that I heard is developing, and they're big enough to both produce and distribute readily, whereas the small firms might have a hard time getting distribution done unless it's just phenomenally well done. So that's my thought process on quickie drugs that are going to be impactful when it comes to the coronavirus. Wow. Well, I want to thank all of you for taking time to join us. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, Hebrew, Choda Hafez, Farsi. Wanted to hedge dough, Swedish, Zdravstvuyte, hello in Russian, Ni hao ma, um, uh, Chinese for hello, and want to wish you all a healthy and happy weekend. Thanks for joining us. Today's show actually was supposed to be about Panasonic, and we will be doing a Panasonic show tomorrow, but obviously not today. Thanks for joining us. Best of luck on your trading next week if you're involved with it. Have a great day. Bye for now.